now. I don't know if he's, I hope he's able to join us. Let me check if, yeah, in the chat room. So Jay said he's in the chat room. Hi. Oo nga eh. Let me ask. So he said he's in the chat room. Um, how do we, has he got the link? Okay. Good evening, everyone. So we're just checking if Jay, one of our speakers, is able to join us. And while we're waiting, shall we just proceed? Chris, do you have a way to get in touch with Jay? Or shall I message him on Facebook? Bear with us. So if you would like to send him the link, uh, Chris. Oh, oh dear. Okay, great. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for registering to attend this evening's briefing about the recently rolled out policy of the Labor government to, to make immigration laws stricter. So I'm Liezel Longboan, or Longboan. I'm the founder and editor of Tinig UK. And this evening we have with us Crystal Diaz and Edgar Baylon. So let me just briefly introduce them to you. I've got my notes somewhere. So Crystal, as we know, is an experienced solicitor specializing in immigration law and family law. She's the founder of Lawyery, and she's a migrant rights advocate. Thank you, Crystal, for agreeing to be with us this evening. And also with us this evening is Edgar Baylon Jr. So he's the Employment and Advocacy Rights Officer of the Southeast and East Asian Center. He is a lawyer, and he offers advice, employment advice to East and Southeast Asian and Filipino migrants in the UK. Also with us this evening, behind the screen, behind the scenes, is Cristeo Guerrero, our very able director of Tindig UK. So we're just waiting for Jay to be able to join us. Anyway, we decided to organize this briefing for everyone because we know, we've heard the um, we've heard the announcement of Prime Minister Kier Starmer on Monday outlining some, um, you know, drastic changes to immigration policies in the UK. So this is contained in a white paper they released later in the day. So the purpose of this evening's briefing is just to provide us some information, reliable information from our invited guests on what these proposals mean to Filipinos here in Britain, and not just Filipinos, but obviously to, other affected immigrants. So before the start of before the start of our live session, I was just chatting with Crystal saying that there's been so many different policy changes presented by the Labor government since they started last year. That includes the cut to winter fuel allowance to over 60s, um, change in the welfare system, cuts again in the welfare benefits, and um, so many different sort of policies, making also in disability, also in employment, encouraging people to to get back into work. So I'd like, maybe before we start, I'd like to get people's sentiments. How are you feeling? How do you feel about this rather, how would I put it, unfriendly language by, or would we say, would it be safe to say anti-immigrant language? Uh, being spoken by, by the Prime Minister. Would anybody want to write in the chat or just open your mic to share your sentiments before we move on? Anybody in the audience? Okay, maybe while you're there, what Crystal and Edgar, I'd like to invite you to just, give your sort of impression on what you've heard so far.
Uh, well, for me, I have been an immigration solicitor for a while, and before Labour, it was the Conservative government, and Theresa May was then the Prime Minister, who basically took on uh, uh, an hostile environment towards immigrants. And now this government is just literally just continuing on, and maybe even worse now. And I voted for Labour. I'm a Labour supporter, but in terms of immigration policies that they have actually, uh, the changes to immigration policies and rules that they have published on Monday, it's quite disappointing. It would affect many, many Filipino workers in the UK for sure.
Thank you, Crystal. And what about you, Edgar?
This is actually shocking and very frustrating. When I encountered the white paper and the news clips related to it, I suddenly remember the plight of the migrant workers here in the UK, particularly my service users. For over 2 years that I'm working as an employment advocacy officer in the Southeast and East Asian Center, not only actually with Filipino workers, but also those who are coming from the communities that I mentioned. um, they have experienced exploitation, all forms of abuses, and oftentimes, because of the lack of safeguards and the support from the government in pursuing these employers for their abuses, they will just keep quiet, they will stay silent, and they will just endure all these abuses because they don't want to lose their immigration status.
Mm,
They don't want to lose their jobs. Families are relying on them. That's the main reason why they are here. And the only hope that they will be able to get out of this situation is when they are settled. And now, because of these proposed changes, it's becoming more difficult. It's becoming more precarious on the part of our migrant workers on how they'll be able to navigate this kind of situation and finally get out of this very dark situation that they are in. It's really, really difficult. I'm really sad about to hear the proposed policies
sorry.
coming from the
Yes.
labor. When they are coming in as the new government, I thought there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but
True.
it's really, really difficult.
Yes. I share your sentiments, Edgar and Crystal. I didn't see it coming. I didn't see I sense that there will be changes in immigration policy because, as I said, last year they've already started bringing in, stricter policies. But the way they've rolled, the language and the framework that they have at the moment in changing immigration policy was completely unexpected. And as you said, Edgar, shocking, and Crystal, it's something that we really have to study, understand, and prepare for, and perhaps, I don't know. Anyway, this is the beginning of a conversation. So I'd like to invite. Okay, so somebody just shared their thoughts. I feel anxious as we already due for our ILR, indefinite leave to remain early. Hi, Jay. So I'll stop there and just
Hello.
welcome Jay Trondillo. Did I say your surname correctly,
Yeah, I'm
Jay?
so sorry having some technical issues here.
I know. Welcome. And Jay, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you. My name is Trondillo. I'm a senior regional director for one of the care companies here in UK, and I'm also co-founder of Filipinos in Care CIC.
Great. So we were just sharing our, our sentiments about this new policy which was announced by the Prime Minister early this week. So I was just reading one of the things mentioned by by those who are here. So Tin says, I feel anxious as we are already due for our indefinite leave to remain early next year. There's no clear path for us. Undecided if we stay or go. My husband and I are both working as nurses and we have two children. So again, frustrated. Karen says, I think it just feels so many uncertainties as it impacts the plans that are already made, and it also creates a lot of questions. Definitely lots of questions, lots of anxiety and uncertainty for everyone. So I would like to invite Crystal now to present, a brief overview, the highlights of the changes being proposed by the government.
Okay, I'm just going to share you my presentation. I've only got 10 minutes, I believe, so I'll try to be quick.
It's okay. Feel free to extend, but we'll do well. As feel free to put in the chat your questions for Crystal, Edgar, and Jay.
So, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat at thank you for joining Tinig this evening. Thank you, Dr. Liezel, for inviting me to be part of this briefing. We're here to talk about something very important, something that could directly impact you, your families, and your future here in the UK. As you know, the UK government has released a white paper on Monday, the 12th of May, outlining major proposed changes to its immigration policy. These changes are not yet implemented, but they give very strong indication of where the government is heading, particularly around reducing migration, tightening eligibility, and focusing on high skilled workers. But remember, the white paper is subject to consultation, so we just have to wait and see what happens. So today's briefing is for information only, not legal advice. Now, the presentation examines the key reforms, their implementation timeline, and potential consequences for affected workers and employers across various sectors. Looking at the skilled worker route, raising the bar, skills threshold increase. So, one of the most impactful changes is that the proposed increase in the minimum skill level required for a skilled worker visa. Currently, the UK accepts skilled workers starting from RQF. So, RQF means Regulated Qualifications Framework. So currently it's level 3, which includes A-level qualifications. Under the new proposal, the threshold would rise to level 6, which is equivalent to a UK bachelor's degree. Now, example of level 3 roles would be like nursing assistants, healthcare assistants, and support workers. Now, these are people who play a crucial role in patient care. This change would mean the approximately 100 occupations will no longer be eligible for skilled worker visas. Now, current skilled worker visa holders will not be immediately affected by the new RQF level 6 skills threshold. They will still be allowed to renew the existing visa, change employment within eligible occupations, and take supplementary work even in roles below level 6. However, the new rules will apply to overseas applicants applying for skilled worker visa and those switching from other visa routes within the UK. For example, if you're here on a student visa or graduate visa holders. This means that if you're already in the UK on a skilled worker visa in a role under RQF level 6, for example, healthcare assistant, you can continue working and renewing your visa under the current rules. But
Okay.
new applicants from abroad and switchers will face the stricter requirements. As you can see also in this slide, increased threshold of salary, increased from previous lowest level of 25,600 with discount, but of course, the impact of this on employers, they may not be able to afford to offer that to the worker. Stricter English language requirements. Now, language requirements are also being raised. For skilled worker visas, the English level is moving from B1 to B2. Now, I've heard so many things about this because it's very difficult to get B1, when doing the English language test. Um, for all adult dependents, a minimum A1 level will now be required as well. So for skilled worker visas from B1 to B2, but now for their dependents, before you didn't have to do English language test, a minimum of A1 level will now be required. When you do apply for settlement, everyone will have to do B2 level.
Okay.
Now, since the health and care worker visa route was expanded in 2022 to include lower skilled social care jobs, there's been a big increase in applications. In 2023, care workers and senior care workers made up 105,000 visas, or 73% of all main health and care worker visas. Now, the government will end overseas recruitment for social care visas. So that's quite shocking, actually. This means the social care visa route will be closed to new applications from abroad. The government recognizes that labor shortages in social care are often driven by poor pay, terms and conditions, leading to low domestic recruitment and retention rates. Now, fair pay agreements are mentioned as a means to address these issues and reduce dependence on overseas workers. For a transition period until 2028, visa extensions and in-country switching will be permitted for those already in the country with working rights on this route. This transition period will be kept under review. So again, you have to watch this space.
Yeah, sorry to go back to that, Crystal, because I think that's where most of the questions are. I think that's the key point that many of our attendees
Yeah.
are actually concerned. So just to be clear, there is a transition period until 2028 when
Hmm.
those who are already here can sort of
Extend.
extend their visa. So they
Yes.
are not, they can extend their visa so that the proposed rules will not affect them. Is that
No.
that's
Yes.
yeah, so that's very clear. Okay,
It's
for
very
those who
clear.
are concerned,
Hmm.
if the new rules which will come out later on, if they're going to be affected by it, so those already here will not be affected by the new rules. Jay, would you like to say anything?
No.
No? Okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Crystal.
Sorry,
Oh,
Lizel. There is
yes.
a caveat actually. Even if you are
Okay,
here, but if you are switching
that's
to
right.
another sector, then you will be subject to the new rules.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's only those who are in RF6, is that correct, Crystal? Who can go down. Is that the point you're trying to make, Edgar? The ones who are in the graduate level work. Sorry, in the is that
I'll give you an example, Liza. Like if
okay?
you've got a butcher working in a factory, then he or she wants to change to she wants to move to the care sector. Then when the policy is already in force or is being implemented, then she will be or he will be subjected to the new rules, just like what happened before. Like when there was actually a change last, I think it was last year, when a care worker cannot bring the dependent anymore. So if initially you're working and you from another sector and you don't have your dependents yet in the UK and you move to that sector, you may be affected by that particular policy. So this may also happen with this particular changes. Is that correct, Crystal? You can,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yep. So please go ahead, Crystal.
So, so the impact um, on this, um, so the government has highlighted several concerns that have driven these reforms, particularly in the social care sector, such as worker exploitation, poor working conditions, and domestic recruitment challenges. These issues have created a problematic cycle that the new policies aim to address through both immigration controls and domestic workforce initiatives. No, so going back then, so as a summary, the impact on existing visa holders. So current skilled workers below RQF 6 can renew visas, change employment, and take supplementary work in currently eligible occupations. Now, for social care workers, benefit from transition period until they can benefit from transition period until 2028, allowing extensions and in-country switching. But for new applicants, they must meet new RQF 6 plus requirements for skilled worker visas. Social care route closed to new overseas applications.
Right.
Now, the consequences for Filipino migrant community, I'll just be quick. The Filipino community is a key part of the UK's health and care workforce, as you know. They will be heavily impacted by these reforms. New care workers from the Philippines will no longer be able to apply from abroad, and those in skilled roles like nursing will face higher salary and language requirements. This
Wow.
is important.
Hmm.
Now, perhaps the most emotional and long term impact comes from the change in the path to settlement, also known as indefinite leave to remain. Now, currently, skilled workers can apply for ILR after 5 years of continuous residence. Under the proposed rules, this will change to 10 years for most visa routes.
Yeah.
So that's double the years that you have to wait to apply for ILR. Now, there will be opportunity to reduce waiting period through economic and, and social contributions,
Mm.
but you have to earn it. You have to prove it. Shorter routes preserved for dependents of British citizens and vulnerable groups, five
Mm.
years. So I have actually got an inquiry on this today. They've been worrying about what about, I'm married to a British national. Do I
Yeah.
have to wait 10 years? You don't. They're sticking to 5 years at the moment, which is
Yeah.
good. The talk about vulnerable groups, these are applications of victims of domestic violence. So that would still be 5 years. Now, there's no clarity on retrospective application to those already on 5 year settlement paths. So, news report based on a leak that that if you have not applied for ILR yet before it is implemented, you will be affected. We've got to watch this space. We just
Mm.
don't have enough information. The information I'm giving you is based from what I read on white paper. Now, the government's proposed earned settlement model represents a fundamental shift in immigration philosophy. While safeguards exist for vulnerable individuals, millions of workers face uncertainty about their long term status in the UK.
Mm.
Now, the government is focusing less on immigration and more on local solutions to workforce problems, especially in social care. It plans to improve pay and conditions through fair pay agreements and boost local skills with training funded by a higher immigration skills charge. Um, Now, I just quickly would like to, include in here,
Yeah.
um, what can you do to future-proof ourselves? We cannot control immigration policy, but we can
Mm,
control how we respond. So here are some practical steps to prepare and protect yourself. Now, secure
okay.
your status early. If you are eligible now for visa renewal, dependent sponsorship, or even ILR, apply as soon as you can. Beat the deadline before the new rules take effect. Upgrade your qualifications. If you're working in an RQF level 3 role, consider upskilling to level 6 where
Mm,
possible through UK accredited courses or bridging programs.
okay.
Work on your English. So even if you already passed B1, prepare now for B2 level. Encourage your family members to study and prepare for A1 level English as well. And lastly, don't rely on social media rumors. Follow updates from the UK Home Office, immigration lawyers, and trusted organizations like Tinig. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for that comprehensive, overview and highlights of the white paper. So, so you've gone through some of these key things, but I think I'll just ask some of the questions, just to refresh our minds, and also to bring in the questions from our participants who emailed us their questions. So feel free, Jay and Edgar, to join Crystal in answering some of these questions. So you've already mentioned this, Crystal, but just to clarify. So okay, I think one of the first thing you mentioned, Crystal, is that there's a transition period, and I think this is for Jay. So the white paper says that there will now be a ban on overseas recruitment for care workers. So that's one. Is that Are we clear on that, Jay, Crystal, and Edgar? When does that ban start? Are we going to wait for when they announce when it actually is going to happen? Jay?
I think only I'm not a legal expert, but in my understanding, I think only when the white paper will be enacted into law,
Correct.
and that's the time that the government will officially release those finalized guidelines in terms of the recruitment ban in regards to RQF, professions or occupations below the RQF6 level. But correct me, Crystal, if I'm wrong in my understanding.
Yeah, you're right.
I
Yeah.
think yes. So I was going to ask Jay, because you're a regional director of in a chain of care homes. Did you see this policy coming? Or were you caught off guard by this announcement?
I'm sure the government did their consultation with the sector, but I don't know to what extent they did the consultation, because surely this certain provisions had consultation happening behind the scenes. But um, like in our organization, I'm not aware if this happened. But I don't work in the strategic level within the business. I work in the operations. Could be yes or could be no, but surely there has been a consultation happening involving the sector, but not sure which providers or organizations were invited into that consultation.
So I think this is my follow-up question. Feel free to ask Jake questions to Crystal and Edgar. So, my question, Jay, is so you're one of the founders of Filipinos in Care, a national organization of Filipinos working in the in the care sector. Have the officers come together? What's your plan, in terms of, how do you, in terms of your members? Obviously, they're going to be affected by this new policy. um, have you got any initial discussions among the officers and members of Filipinos in care?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we had a meeting about this following the government announcement, and our position at this point remains neutral until we see the whole white paper being enacted into law. Um, I think it will be interesting to understand the government's plan to support the sector that will be heavily affected by these changes, what investments or further changes or support in the industry that will be put in place following the proposition or the enactment of this law.
Okay, so I just saw, thank you, Jay. I just saw a question from Karen. So she's asking about the timeline. Let me just go back to that. Um, where is it? So is there a timeline when would the proposed changes be enacted into law? Does anyone of you have, some information on that?
There was an indication on the white paper, some of them
Yes.
will be implemented before the end of the year,
Yeah.
but we don't know which ones, and it could be next year. So
Mm,
again, you're just gonna have to uh, keep yourself informed. So look at the Home Office website for further information on this, because we just don't know ourselves.
that's
We just
true.
don't know. It's,
Thank you.
Lizel, I
Yes,
just want to
Edgar.
clarify that this is just a white paper and it will require
Mm,
legislation for all our audience.
yeah.
And as regards to question about the timeline, I think the question would be how about the political will? What is the strength of the political will of the government to implement this? Because I believe this is not a well thought policy changes, set of policy changes. This is more of a political move for the labor government
Mm,
for so many reasons. So I will not elaborate on that. But I think, yeah, it would depend on the political will of the government to implement these
mm,
changes.
okay. Um, Thank you for that. And Abby says, might be helpful. Yeah, well, we already said that this is more of a white paper and it's more of a, proposal from the government. And yeah, she's saying, yeah, and as you said, be the deadline before the new law is introduced for those who are, in the process of, you know, uh, processing their indefinite leave to remain, do it before any of these laws, new laws take into effect. Lauren is asking, what does the government mean by economic and social contributions?
that's a very good question.
That's
It's
good.
not actually specified on the white paper. So we're just gonna have to again wait. What do they mean by that? That does that mean that you pay more tax,
Mm,
or are you a good citizen? Yeah, that's kind of part of living in the UK, that you don't get yourself in trouble, you don't have criminal records, so you have to like be out there, be known to the UK as this person who's done so many things. But what is it? We just don't know. But
exactly.
mostly it's basic economic reasons. That means that you're paying tax and not taken advantage of the universal credit. So, but as you know, skilled workers, they're tied to their sponsors, to their employers. And part of the condition of their visa is that they have no recourse to public funds. So
Mm,
they can't use that. But they have to pay tax. They have to continue paying tax, until whilst they're working. But with these skilled worker applications themselves, the visa fees, not considering nurses and care workers, but the others, they have to pay visa fees, which are really high. They're over like £1,000, 1,700. On top of that, part of the application is they have to pay immigration health surcharge, which is 1,035 per
mhm.
year, and they have to pay that in advance. So they're already contributing to the economy by paying that alone. So we're just going to have to wait and see what do they mean about that?
Yes. So Ab is asking, the consultation is going to happen towards the end of the year. If you already have a settled status and you will be eligible to apply for citizenship next year, can it be safe to say that those with settled status will not be as affected? And there's a likelihood that the new rules won't be fully implemented. Sorry. Yeah, there's a likelihood that the new rules won't be fully laid out and implemented until 2028.
Well, we hope so. Um, reading the white paper again, with the if you're married to a British national, you only you only need to wait 5 years,
Yeah.
so you're okay. Um, the what it says on the white paper, that it will also increase the years, uh, to 10 years before you can apply for citizenship. So it's quite unclear to me when I was reading it. So they're saying, okay, 10 years, to apply for indefinite leave to remain. But as you know, if you're on skilled worker visa, you have to wait 1 year, uh, before you can apply for citizenship, right? So 5 years for now, a skilled worker, then when you get indefinite leave to remain, that's 1 year, then you can apply for British citizenship. That's the current rule. But what they're proposing is that to increase it to 10 years, which means that, you have to wait for that. Does that mean as well you have to wait 1 year
Mm,
for indefinite leave to remain before you can apply for citizenship? Don't know. Just don't
yeah.
know.
So there's a long question here from Chris. I don't know if you have access to this question, uh, Jay, Chris, and Edgar. So basically, he's asking which professions fall under the RQF level 6. Does it include nurses? Okay, let's focus. Does it include nurses and occupational therapists and physios? Do we know? Um,
It's down to the employer,
hmm, for Chris.
to really, it depends on the employer, what's their job description. But Jay, nurses, I believe some would be under RQF level 5 or
Mm,
6. It doesn't show on the immigration rules. It's very complicated when you actually look at the immigration rules itself.
mm, okay.
It gives that impression that it needs to be RQF level 6 under or equivalent in the under UK qualification framework. So does that mean that because our bachelor's degree in the Philippines is not equivalent to an RQF level 6, would that compromise us? But until further guidance will be shared, it's quite difficult to answer the question or assume really.
Hmm. So, and one other question here. I think I'll just ask the second question. If you have RQF level 6 qualification, or is able to do necessary steps to acquire one prior to the implementation of the new rule, does this mean that they still fall under the 5 year route to settle? If you already have an RQF level 6 qualification, or you acquire one prior to the implementation of the new rule, does this mean that, the 5 year route to settlement applies to you?
I can respond,
This,
Lizel. I've got an impression
okay.
that this is actually very unfortunate also with this white paper because
Hmm.
those who got RQF 6 and above, they label it as high skilled
Hmm.
workers, and they say that they won't be that affected by the changes because anyway they already have the qualifications and they are still entitled to the 5 year route. However, those who are in the lower RQF, and this is very unfortunate, they label carers as low skilled. And not everyone can do the job of a carer. It will require a lot of skills, but nonetheless, they are the ones who are mostly affected by this. I just want to go back to the question earlier about whether the settled status will be affected by this. I think the one that's mostly affected is the migrant worker who is on his way to settlement, the
Mm,
process of being settled. But once you've got the settlement status, you will still be entitled on the same with the same rights as a settled status now. So
okay,
yeah,
I'll stop you there, Edgar. Just for the information of the audience, what do we mean by settled status? Just to be clear to everyone, what do we mean by that?
uh, Krista probably can elaborate
Do you
what
want
is
me to
meant
answer?
by
Okay.
settled
Settled status means indefinite leave to remain.
to remain.
That means there's no restrictions uh, on how long you can stay in the country. And
Okay.
also on when you have indefinite leave to remain, that lifts the restriction on no recourse to public funds. You know, you are allowed to use the universal credit. But take note, you will lose your indefinite leave to remain if you leave the country for more than 2 years or for at least 2 years. So, whilst you're not British, just be mindful that if you've been away for that long, they will take that settled status from you. They will take that away from you.
And to go back to what Edgar was saying, if you have a settled status, if you have indefinite leave to remain status, the new rules will not apply to you.
I think most probably it won't affect the ILR holders that
Yeah.
much. I will just include, Crystal, that if you are an ILR holder or you are ILR or a permanent resident, then you can actually apply in any kind of jobs
Yes.
in
Yeah.
any sector, no limit.
You are not tied
Um,
to your employer.
Yeah.
You can be employed
yeah.
by anyone.
What I would like them, I just would, I'd like to get Jay's thoughts on this. Edgar, you mentioned about care workers being described as low-skilled workers, and I think I agree with you on this. So last week, I spoke at a care home, and I met this, she's a care assistant, or anyway, she's a staff of the care home. And she said to me, so she's originally from India, she said to me that she came here as on a graduate student visa. So she's got a master's degree. And when she finished her master's degree, or I think while she was finishing her master's degree, she started working in a care home. So she's got the degree, obviously, a postgraduate degree here in the UK, but working in a care home. So, in terms of the sort of level of that work, there's a rather, how would I put it, contradiction between her being a graduate degree holder, coming here on a graduate visa, and then working as a, care assistant. I think she's been promoted now, but how does that work in the care sector, Jay? Have you seen staff with, graduate qualifications working lower than their educational background, Jay?
Yeah, I have, when I was a care home manager, I have a lot of employees on a postgraduate visa, and they have level 7 equivalent qualification in the UK, and they are working on, different roles and work. And I think occupation, occupation and the qualification is different. So in care, the occupation care is aligned to the countries like level 2 RQF3. I think
Mm,
for you to I mean as a minimum requirement for you to do this kind of job. Whilst if you have a level 7 qualification, if you have a suitable sponsor, or at least a minimum level 6, and you have a suitable sponsor who able to sponsor you, and you meet the minimum requirements for that occupation, then by all means you can apply for that route. But that doesn't necessarily need to be in care industry. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal.
You're right. It's the job that's not the education
right.
relating to the RQF. So
Mm,
that's two completely different. And Jay's in fact spot on explaining that.
okay. Thank
Can,
you.
can I just like mention, because I'm just thinking about, this issue with going back to indefinite leave to remain. I think that looking at the white paper, just remembering what it said, like if you're, they mentioned about settlement and citizenship. So if they're going to increase citizenship, the years towards citizenship to 10 years, and if you are currently on ILR and you haven't applied for citizenship and you've only done 5 years, it may be that you would have to wait 10 years before you can apply for citizenship. And that's how I understood it. But I think we're just going to have to wait what happens. So if you're on settled status and if you only like, so uh, you've done your ILR already and you're thinking of applying for citizenship, you better do it now, because
Mm,
we don't know that once it is implemented, they're looking at increasing, or it's on the white paper, increasing the time 10 years
mm.
before you can apply for citizenship.
Okay, so that's a warning.
It
You
is,
know.
yes.
And,
Yeah.
and I think and I think there are two things here as well because in the white paper it says that they will
Sorry to
increase
stop
your
you, Jay. I think
qualifying.
there's a bit of a background noise.
Is it
Can you
me?
hear that? Or is it just
Yeah.
me?
Yes, like a highway, like the
Okay,
cars.
sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
Is it me or sorry?
It's okay.
And there are also two things here. One is in the white paper it says that they're going to increase your qualifying period to apply for a settled status from 5 to 10, but it's not clear whether they're also changing a qualifying period to apply for a British citizenship because at the moment you just need to be on a settled status for 5 years, and then I think you can apply for a British citizenship. So that's not clear as well.
Okay. So while we think about that, I just have I have a sort of a feedback here from Christopher. Um, I think is this uh, Christopher, Christopher Dias. I think it is highly likely that without significant pushback from employers and the public, the government will go ahead. It's unlikely that the opposition parties would oppose the proposals as Labour or traditional, the pro-immigration party. Is this that the opposition parties would oppose the proposals as Labour were traditionally the pro-immigration party? That's true. Any thoughts on this, or shall we move on to the next question? Okay, I'll ask. This is from Manung George. Question for esteemed guests: has there been a similar precedent before in recent years that was done by the UK government? And if so, how did that affect the general Filipino migrant population? There has been. Crystal?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes. So, uh, Manung George is asking: has there
Come
been
on.
a similar precedent before in recent years? So similar policy changes in immigration, and if so, how did that affect the Filipino migrant population?
uh, in terms of the care worker, the health and care worker visas.
Yes, more specifically, Manong George, would you like to open up your mic and ask the question?
So,
Yeah, I think it's just a broad
it's just,
question though.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. The general Filipino migrant
Yes.
population. Um, uh, Looking back, I think I mentioned this earlier when I started doing immigration law in 2008. Um, Actually, before then, it was really easy, you could say that, to bring over workers, students, family members. In fact, before they introduced the points-based system, there were 250,000 students applied to come to the UK with a view of actually switching to work permit. And then when they introduced the points-based system, so there was like, I don't know if you remember, you have the different tiers. You have tier one, tier two, tier for the general migrants, tier four for students, tier five, which is still there, but tier two now it's changed to skilled worker holder visas in 2021 or 2022. But basically, there were so many Filipinos applying to come to study and work in the UK, but the government stopped that. What they did, they closed down private colleges, and that affected students because they couldn't transfer anywhere else,
Mm,
and they couldn't switch to work visa because they took away the caregiver visa because you were allowed to switch to work visa, but then they stopped that.
mm,
um it's And then over the years, so like in 2012 again, they introduced new immigration rules affecting domestic workers. I mean,
yeah,
I've been following domestic workers since 1998 when they became um, they were not allowed to stay,
yeah,
to work with different employers and so on, until the concession was granted in 1998, and it
yeah.
became rule for them that they're allowed to settle even,
Mm,
after 5 years. That was taken away in 2012.
yeah,
So, and at the same year, for family members, they introduced a financial threshold,
yeah,
um, and that increased from 18,600 to now 29,000.
yeah.
So it's really a big struggle for Filipino community. But
Mm,
just last year, going back to carers, um, as you know, during the pandemic, they suddenly there's a big influx of carers from the Philippines because they needed the workforce, right? Being resilient, that we are being um, uh, kind, caring that we are. They recruited loads of nurses and care workers from the Philippines.
mm,
And during the pandemic, as you saw, that we were right in there, right in
yes,
the front line. And then given the chance as well now for our families to settle, the carers families are able to come here. But that changed last year.
yeah,
As you know, the carers dependents were no longer allowed to come to the UK as of April 2024.
yeah.
So it's like, okay, what's going on? And now
So,
you can see that they have, or they will close now this route for carers, for social carers, and that's it.
yeah,
So that means that they no longer need us. But the problem is still there. As there's a big
exactly.
problem in social care,
Yeah,
because I mean, my friend actually said to me, I will never do that job because
mm,
it never pays much, and the work is really hard. They won't do the job. So where they're going to get the workforce? They have been saying for many
mm,
years, with the
yeah,
conservative government, that you have to train the UK workers, and that's for the last 14
mm,
years. And what's happened to that?
yeah. Let me
So,
just, yes,
so
thank you, Crystal. I was
that
going to,
that's
yes,
because
I was
I
going,
know my history, because I follow it. I do immigration law, and it's just really frustrating for me as a Filipino that it's the demand is not there anymore. Therefore, they're shutting the door.
exactly. And I was just going to say, Crystal, I think it's the hostile environment policy of Theresa May in 2012, which I think started, the government's conservative government initially, and now the Labor government, following the same approach to immigration. So
Yeah.
let me just ask you, Jay. So how are, with what Crystal is saying about, the approach towards immigration, and now that route for care is going to be closed. What are the prospects now for Filipino carers? So before you answer that, Jake, could you just give us like a broad picture of I don't know if you have the statistics, with Filipinos in care, in terms of how many, do we have an idea how many Filipino carers do we have in the UK? With an estimate,
So
maybe.
Filipino, we don't have a data, but based on the data released by the Skills for Care in 2023, we have 17% of the adult social care workers in England are non-British nationals. And I think predominantly, it's a big proportion being Filipino
So what's
in
the
the area.
figure? Just so we have an idea,
I have
that's 17% if you have it with you. But if not, in your own, in your own company, do you know how many Filipinos work for your?
we are a big organization operating nationally. In our organization, the proportion of overseas or migrant workers varies across regions, but it's substantial overall.
How do you think this will affect, the care sector then, Jay?
I think it's really a challenge. I think there's a fundamental problem already at hand, and suddenly this new changes. So going back to my point earlier, as a person working in the industry, and I started in this industry as a care worker, and I can resonate to Crystal's comment earlier about the job being hard. It's really hard work. Um, it will be interesting to see what sort of strategies that the government have in terms of supporting the sector. What investments are there? Are they proposing to increase I don't know, training for people to come and have a career in care? Will there be funding? Are they encouraging domestic um, nationals to have a career in care, and what does that look like, and how does the pay look like to entice and encourage people to work in this industry?
Because that's what the white paper is saying, isn't it, Crystal and Edgar? If you've read it, that there's been apparently an underfunding in training among young people, so that we have depended on migrant workers to fill the vacancies in the care sector. And that's now sort of encouraged, abuses, poor pay, etc., etc. But as Crystal said, it's been, 14 years that they've been saying these things, and not much has happened, since they've looked into this, into the possible cause on why there's a shortage in care workers in the UK. So let's go on. We've only got 30 minutes left, and I think let's touch on some of the uh, opinions being shared by our audience. So Vienna says here, some people say that the white paper is almost as good as passed, since most seat in the government is held by Labor. Do you agree? So this is a question. Do you think this is like, it's going to happen eventually, or we can't really say at this point if it's um I don't we're not sure.
Yeah, we're not
I think
sure.
there's still more further consultations that will happen,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and obviously the government needs to involve a wider kind, or inclusive kind of consultation following this, and it will be interesting to see what will that look like in the next coming months.
Thank you, Pauline. Pauline wrote, Edgar is right. This is a political move. The government is going after those that are easier to control, in open and close quotation, to show UK voters that they're doing something about immigration. The real issue in the UK public mind is the boats coming from across the channel, and the government is struggling to control that. What they're doing with the white paper is a dead cat strategy. They're worried about the success of reform. And I think you are right, Pauline. This is a reaction. This is clearly, I'm with you. I think this is a reaction from the Labour government on the recent success of reform in the local elections.
Yes.
Um, but as I was speaking to my husband on Monday, and he was saying that, success in the local elections does not necessarily translate in the national elections. So for the Labor government to react this way, I think it's really worrying.
Yeah.
Ab saying yes, I think Edgar was on point, saying that's a political move. They wanted to create a buzz and create worry, even panic on prospective applicants or immigrants. And yes, hostile environment. Okay. There's a question here from Ab. Is there a chance to even get the proposal opposed? What are your thoughts on this? Do you think if
Uh,
we
if
gather all Filipinos and other immigrants,
I think that's
what do you
almost the
think?
same comment from Christopher. We've skipped it. So what can we do about it? This is actually, this is also unfortunate. Like Jay and Crystal mentioned about this, that the government is doing this under the cloak of improving the economy, improving whatever we have right now, and this create actually public opinion, and even among the members of our community, even Filipinos who are already settled and naturalized, they will say, oh, this is really good for everyone, for the government, and for the society, for us who are settled and citizens of the UK. And because of it, this caused division among the
Mm,
people. Instead of supporting the vulnerable who will be affected by this policy, this is actually a strategy also of the government. This is we can always do something about it. So we have to
definitely.
look at um, the impact of this in the particularly to those who are already vulnerable. I've mentioned some of them earlier, and we can actually join hands in advocating for what's better for particularly the carers, those who are labeled as low skilled workers. We can always do something, and probably they just there's a question earlier whether this is already set in stone. I don't think so. There will still be a lot of debates and
Yeah,
consultation, just like what was mentioned, and we have to be proactive in telling the government what is in our mind as regards to these issues.
on that point, Edgar, so sorry, you go ahead, Jay.
So I second to that, opinion of Edgar. It's still a proposal. It's still not a law, and the parliament must still debate and approve the changes proposed, based on this white paper. And if we had to look at previous precedents, like for example in 2015, the government exempted the nurses from the 35K ILR income threshold after a strong backlash from the NHS and the unions. In 2023, the care workers were added to the shortage occupation list after lobbying by the care providers during the
Yeah,
COVID-19 recovery. And just last year, the initial ban on dependents for care workers was softened with an in-country switching exemption. So surely, as a collective community, we have a role to, we have our say here, as a stakeholder, and even media and public opinion has successfully changed this based on precedent. So, there's something that can be done.
definitely. So, Edgar, you work for the Southeast and East Asian Center, as an employment rights and advocacy officer. Has SEAC come up with some, ideas or plans on their response to these proposed changes, or are you working with other charities within the community,
Yeah, we
or
are already
holding a
doing. Yeah,
consultation, Edgar?
the answer is yes. Yeah, we will do our best to oppose this. We will use all channels to make our voices heard by the authorities. And we are only doing some consultation with some partners and organizations. Of course, we will have Tinig UK also as a partner doing this.
Definitely.
And we also wait for the other partners. So we are just consolidating information. We will be planning very soon on how we will tackle these issues. Definitely, we will take action on this.
Yes. So there's a comment here. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Leading on from Pauline, Reform recently won Runcorn by just 6 votes over Labor, highlighting a glooming threat from. And yeah, sorry, let me just. Where is that? Oh, there it is. Highlighting a glooming threat from a rising anti-immigrant rhetoric. If this is in fact a political strategy, what are your opinions on this? Is this going to help overcome alt-right movements in the long run? Edgar.
The votes, this is actually the situation. I'm not an expert in psychology, but if you don't oppose an idea, it will remain an idea that's popular.
Mm,
So if they are saying a lot of things against migration, then and we remain silent about this and we don't
mm,
give our own ideas about this issue, then whatever is existing, then they will think that this is actually true. So yeah,
mm,
that's why we should really do our part in educate the public that migration, like they will give us 10 years to become settled. But
mm.
during that process, we are already contributing to the economy. We are all Filipinos are hardworking people. We always want to
Definitely.
work. We always want to contribute to the family, to the society, and um, eventually to the economy. So yeah, we really need to make our voices heard.
And that's the reason why we're holding this, briefing, just to make sure that, we react, quickly, making sure that the government knows people are responding to their announcement. We're making our, feelings and our thoughts heard this evening, at least as an initial attempt. So, Edgar, I hope, you include us in your plans if you're holding a consultation at some point. So, this is just, I think, an initial attempt for us to discuss this really important topic. Jay, so you're saying that Filipinos in care is sort of waiting to hear, more on what's coming up before it
We are
formulates
following
a
this
plan,
topic.
or do you
Yeah,
have some, sorry?
we are following this topic, and we are looking at the news, and we're just um, forming our really ideas on what we're gonna do next in terms of how it will gonna shape our future activities within the organization, and we'd be more than happy to collaborate with you guys as well.
Yeah, and will you
Definitely.
be, as a group, will you do you intend to join in, consultations, or will you want to be part of those consultations if the government
Definitely,
invites
because it affects us,
community
and
group?
I think this sector is, we are there are so many Filipinos in this sector that we would welcome to be included in consultation.
Crystal, you're a member of FDWA, Filipino Women's Association, and so many different other groups. I think this evening, now that we're, sort of nearly wrapping up, I think it's more of our voices now as not just obviously looking at the issue, but also what can we do about this issue, as some of our, audience have mentioned here. What
I
about, have there been any discussions within FDWA
Oh,
on
the
this
Filipino
topic?
Women's Association, UK, because it's only like it happened Monday.
Yeah.
We haven't really had the chance to have a meeting about it, but I'm sure they would like to discuss this further. But going back to how can we voice out this, this opposition to these proposals, you can write to your MP,
Yeah.
right? So, if you are really against to the proposals, write to them. You're a part, you are a constituent, and you have every right to voice, what concerns you. So write to your local MP. Unfortunately, in Kent, I live in Kent. Kent County Council just had reform as well. I said, oh my God. So it's like, what's happening? So we don't want them. We don't want them to run the country, right? So we've got to voice out. So the likes of Filipinos in Care,
Mm,
Filipino Nurse Association, Filipino Nurses Association in the UK, um, we have so many associations,
mm,
within the community. We got to, stick together. And I do support for one Filipinos in Care, because they're the first ones, the first
mm.
organization, in fact,
Yes,
to support and advocate for carers, Filipino carers in the UK. So I'm right there with you. And I
definitely.
look forward, in fact, to their event on the 24th of May, because this is going to be a very timely and relevant topic on the day.
Yes, yes. So Karen wrote, there are Filipinos that are in politics and member of the labor government. Would you know their opinion, what is their opinion on this? So I have a sense, Karen, that sadly, because they are part of the Labor Party, um, that they may, you know, well, I've heard, this is just my sense, that, some of these Labor Party members, because of their fear of reform, for some reason, that they are, supporting the government line, Keir Starmer's approach on this. Well, that's my,
We
that's
have
my
a Filipino
sense.
MP, right?
Yes,
He's Filipino
Tony
British.
Vaughan.
He's Tony Vaughan.
Yes,
So I think we should, contact him. He's actually in Kent, in Folkestone. He's
that's right.
right. So we should contact him. We have a couple of labor councillors,
Yes,
Lotis Bautista and Myla Arseno.
Mylar Sana, yes.
So
We
it's
should
a shame we
organize
don't have any
one.
more. Huh?
Yes, we should organize one. So actually, to be honest with you, I thought of, getting in touch with them, but in my mind, because the announcement was only made on Monday, that these
Yeah.
labor councillors and, labor MP would actually may not want to, to be involved in discussions,
Before on
this
spotlight.
early. Yes, this early when when things are still sort of quite quite controversial, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for next, for next events, Edgar, Jay, and Crystal, and others who are here, would love to organize a follow up, forum, and potentially invite, Tony Von, Mylar Sano, and Lotis Bautista, who are all Labor Party members and politicians, to share their thoughts on this matter. We have 15 minutes left. Are there other things you'd like to share?
I think Edgar was telling us a story about his, someone's experience,
Yeah.
being recruited from abroad.
It's generally Crystal. The situation actually made it difficult for those who are victims of modern slavery to get recourse under the national referral mechanism, because they are already increasing the threshold of the evidence required. So previously I've referred some victims of modern slavery, and they're asking a lot of evidence now to support the application. I've got one case, and it took 3 years actually to decide on it. We've got overwhelming evidence to support the case for modern slavery. Just because the opposing party is an ambassador, even the police actually testified against our service user, our client, and we lose the case, even if we've got overwhelming evidence.
Mm.
This happened even before the implementation of this policy. How much more if this policy will be implemented? They will increase all this threshold. They are saying that this is good for, but they forgot humanity on this. They probably have not seen the what is on the ground, what is happening to the people who are victims of modern slavery, even victims of domestic abuse. They
Mm.
say they will retain the policy for those victims of domestic abuse. Uh, but there's actually a gap there. Like, if you're a victim of domestic abuse and your partner is on a visa, not settled, not a citizen, you can be given some support, but you cannot apply for ILR. So imagine if this policy will be implemented, it will be more difficult for these victims to get redress. And even if you are a victim of abuses in a workplace and you want to get redress to the process, it's already difficult now. It's really
Mm.
challenging to get, that, you can't get a legal aid to support your case. So the vast majority of our clients who have problems with their employment, they won't pursue cases anymore. And if this will be implemented, the more that they will become silent and they will become victims of, uh, they will be pushed back and become more, um, it will become more difficult for them and wait for that long before they are able to get out of that situation. It's really, really, really difficult. One more
Yeah.
thing, since we have a limited time. So this policy, these pronouncements, they want to hear public opinions. They want to create public opinions. They label people as low skilled and high skilled. It causes division. As a Filipino, if they stigmatize one sector, they will look at us the same way regardless of where
Mm.
you are right now, regardless of the kind of work that you have. So you
Yeah.
don't think that, oh, I'm okay because I am labeled as high skilled. I'm
Mm.
not low skilled. But
Mm.
when you walk on the street, those who are promoting this anti-immigrant policy, they will look at you
Mm.
the same way. So we have to be united. We should be able to stand as one.
I think thank you for that, Edgar. Thank you for sharing about, that case you handled. So I think, with all of these, the emotions are high at the moment. I've seen, reactions on comments on Facebook and things like that. So we had the anti, immigration riots last year, in the summer of last year. And I think we should be, prepared as immigrants to speak up. And obviously, as Crystal said, let's be informed. Let's make sure that we read the latest guidelines, be abreast with the news on what's going on. But let's also make sure that, we speak up, and I think be ready for any anti-immigrant rhetoric, from people who are, just not very much aware of the contributions of immigrants in this country. So I think let's be prepared for, what the coming weeks will look like. But how do we, apart from, being informed, and Crystal said, if you're now ready to, apply for British citizenship, go for it. Don't wait for the deadlines. Um, and upskilling yourself. I think you mentioned that, Crystal, as well. What else, before I read the comment in front of us, what else can we do? Also, we're planning, obviously, as a community, to have follow-up consultations. Um, what can you share in terms of, individual and collective efforts to, to respond to this policy change?
I would
Any
say
thoughts?
always consult with a qualified immigration solicitor
Yeah.
or registered with the IAA. Unfortunately, there are so many um,
Mm,
uh, unqualified advisors there, and I know a few who's actually active within the community. Um, they take your money, but then they give you the wrong advice. So in this case now, it's very, very important that you actually trust someone who will give you sound advice, valid advice. So I mean, at Lawyery, we are registered with the SRA. Myself, I've been a solicitor for 21 years. My
mm,
husband, Christopher, was also an immigration lawyer, an employment lawyer. He's been qualified for 23 years. I've got another Filipino solicitor who's qualified. Recently, we have been doing just immigration and family. So we are, we know what's happening and we know the intentions of the Home Office. Even if it's not us, make sure you check that they are registered with the Law Society SRA by looking on the website. So yeah, it's always seek legal advice. That's my advice to everyone.
Thank you, Crystal. So make sure you deal with, trained, and lawyers, as Crystal said, and registered with those bodies she mentioned. Obviously, Crystal is here with us and she's been active in the Filipino community. So if you'd like to get in touch with her, and Edgar too, he works for SIAC. You can also get in touch with Edgar if you have any questions on immigration. Edgar.
Liza, I just want to highlight that. I just want to echo what Crystal said. They
Mm.
don't sometimes they don't just give the wrong advice. So after paying, you can find them. So
Oh
yeah, you
gosh,
should go to trusted people. Yeah, I've got a lot of service users who they've already paid. Then they
unscrupulous.
can find you. It's very good news.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. So please be careful in who you approach.
yeah, and that's the
What we
consequence of
haven't
this.
actually touched on, actually, sorry, is that I don't know if you know, a lot of Filipinos are applying for asylum. Because when you apply for
Mm,
asylum, actually, it's free of charge, that you don't have to pay. But not everyone is eligible or entitled to apply for asylum. So just be careful. If somebody tells you, oh, just apply for asylum, don't do it. You
mm,
need someone to assess your case. It's a case by case basis. Applying for asylum is not the answer. So just be
definitely.
careful. Yeah.
Oh gosh. So thanks for bringing that up, Crystal. Please take, proper, reliable advice from an ethical lawyer. Um, one last question here from Vienna. Some of us are based in Scotland, and the sentiment here is that Scotland will be at a great disadvantage if they do implement these seemingly anti-immigrant policies. Do you think there might be a chance that the Scottish government would push for a Scotland-only visa? And how likely do you think this would be possible? What
That's a really
is
good question. Yeah.
Ah, I
sort
can
of like,
answer Crystal on this.
yeah.
Unless Scotland will become independent, immigration actually is not a devolved. It can never be a devolved power. So it
Mm,
will always be a
yeah.
national policy. So I don't think that's gonna happen unless Scotland, the people of Scotland decides that they
Mm.
will be independent.
And then I'm also going to speak for Tinig UK. So before we before we end at some point, so I'd like to mention to everybody here that Tinig UK, we're a non-profit community interest company. We're all volunteers. I'm a volunteer, and we have five directors. All our contributors work for free, just for the love of writing articles for our audience, unless we get projects, for example. So in 2023, 2022, we received funding from Purpose Foundation to write about Filipino domestic workers and how they're impacted by the overseas domestic worker visa. So unless we have those, funding given to us to write, authoritative articles, all of us, work for free um, at Tinig UK. So what I'd like to ask you this evening, so I'll put it in the chat, is if you could please help us with our fundraising. So we're trying to raise £3,000 to help support our work for this year, for next year. So last year we raised £1,103, and that's helped us continue our work for 2025. We managed to pay our domain, what's domain hosting, and all of the basic things we need to run the website. But for next year, we'd like to ask you to support us with the fundraising. So we're trying to raise £3,000. So my son, myself, husband, two friends, two little boys will be running with us a mini marathon 3K uh, at, uh, in Reading on the 1st of June. So there will be three boys. age 8 years old, and
Oh,
two adults will be running 3K. So I think that's my request from everybody this evening. I'll also share it again on our Facebook page, but please, we would really appreciate it if you could, any amount you could donate for our fundraising would be really, really appreciated. And that's it from me, really. Um, any last thoughts before we end this evening's discussion? What we can do, I think, from what we've discussed this evening is we'll continue talking about this issue. I will get in touch with Jay for Filipinos in Care, Edgar at SEAC. Hopefully, we can also bring in Kanlungan, Southeast and East Asian Women's Association, FDWA, and many other community groups in our communities. Apparently, there are 200 Filipino organizations registered with the Philippine Embassy. Hopefully, we can also bring in the Philippine Embassy so we can properly meet, whether that's online or in person, just to give us an opportunity to come together and maybe sign one document, sign one statement. As Crystal said, we can individually write our MPs, but I think a statement from one organization, whether that's Filipinos in Care, FDWA, or one statement from every organization, Philippine organization in the UK, I think would carry a lot of weight. So we'll keep talking. And for those of you who are here this evening, please um, tell us your thoughts. Email us if you have any suggestions, or if you'd like to to write articles, share your own thoughts on this matter. Siza said, Philippines in Care will be monitoring this. Thank you, Joseph. Good job on behalf of IECEP Europe. Thank you for this very informative insight for this on this immigration rule. Thank you, everyone. And Karen said, thank you so much to all the speakers and for organizing this session. Really helpful discussion, though still a lot of uncertainties, definitely. We just have to wait for further clarifications and guidance following the white paper release. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time. Thank you again to our guests, to Chris, and we will write a piece on this topic. Bye. Thank
bye.
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Lysel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.